Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Uh, Sorry about Monday.
Yeah.
I had a problem with load shedding. I still don't have data, by the way. I don't know if other people have received data. Um, but mine
Yeah.
has
Some
not
of,
come through yet.
I think MTN has came through.
Okay,
Some of
some
MTN.
people from MTN might. Uh, Sorry about Monday. That's just YouTube repeating itself. Okay, that's fine. So we will continue as we normally do. For those of us who can stay on, please do. If you are not able to stay on because of data challenges, I will do what we normally do: share the content of this lecture on our various platforms, on Moodle and on WhatsApp. I had a problem with load shedding. I still don't have data, by the way. I don't know if other Okay, let people me have give me a few seconds. I just want to shut off that YouTube. Okay, I found it. It's so funny what this thing does. Um, when you go on YouTube Live, it then puts it on another browser, which I'm not on, and then it double speak itself. But I've sorted that now. So anyway, today we are going to continue with Nkrumah and just really sit with that conversation and understand some of the things that he is raising about new colonialism in Africa. So we're still sitting on the context and sort of zoning into the theme of colonial states. So we are sitting with that. Welcome to those who are able to join us. If you've not been with us, we have this is our fifth lecture. We started really just looking at the context of African politics, asking a question that says, what are the things that we need to know when we study Africa? And in that conversation, we have been sitting a lot. We started with Taiwo, which is in the lectures that I've circulated, um, really giving us a sense of what does it mean to study Africa. And we looked at four different perspectives that argue about what is African studies. And some of those perspectives argue that African studies are those kinds of studies that can only be done by Africans themselves, um, studying within African institutions who actually are interested to find solutions to African problems. And another perspective, of course, was that anyone who studies Africa can be said to be doing African studies as long as that is done from the perspective that is African, meaning that if one uses any theoretical angles or ideologies to understand the problems of Africa, they don't have to necessarily be African themselves. They can argue to be studying African politics or engaged in African studies, which is what you see a lot happening in the world. We have a lot of non African scholars residing in various parts of the globe who have produced massive narratives about the African continent. So that perspective looks at that. And then there's also a perspective that says anyone who studies African issues and really are located anywhere in the country, in the world, in the globe, especially as long as they're interested to understand and desire to know more about Africa, could be argued to be doing African studies. And then the last one was the idea that African people, wherever they are in the world, whether you are in Latin America, in Asia, particularly the diaspora, if you're outside of the African continent and you are engaged in narratives, creation of knowledge that is centered around understanding African ways of being and African ways of living, desire to know anything about Africa, economics, politics, culture, nature, and so on, you can be said to be arguing, to be studying to be doing African studies. So we have been there, and what we then have done also was to start looking at Kwame Nkrumah's work, introducing the idea of new colonization, which he actually says in his book. We are referencing his book, which is called Neo-Colonialism, um, the last stage of imperialism. His argument really is that in that book, the kinds of new forms of colonization that we see on the African continent are the kinds that, in his view, are the last forms and perhaps the most dangerous forms of colonization that we see. And it's not just in the African continent. He's looking at this perspective globally in various parts of former colonies. But of course, we are contextualizing it to Africa because of this module. So we started then last week, I think when we closed on Friday, introducing a reading that I had shared with you, which is this one of Nkrumah. He wrote this work in the 50s. It was finally published in 1965 for the first time, and it is popularly then also was published by the US in 1966. And of course, it continues to be republished. But I think it's important to understand the time and the context in which Nkrumah was writing, because he was writing in the 50s. And the 50s, and we are staying with the subject. Remember why we are talking about Nkrumah. We want to know um, certain things about Africa. If you are doing African politics and you're studying Africa, there are certain things that we need to know about Africa, mainly because some of those things are usually excluded in content and in narratives when we talk about Africa, when we talk about African politics, when we narrate the story of Africa. So Nkrumah then, together with Tai, will remind us of these things. And one of the things he reminds us of is that at the time that he was writing in between the 50s and the 60s, just after Africa got, its independence from colonization, immediately a pattern kicked in African politics or African forms of liberation, which is what he calls new colonization. So that is what we are talking about. We are talking about Nkrumah's idea of new colonization. So what I did last week was also to show you an example of the Democratic Republic of Congo. How in the death, in the assassination of one of Africa's liberation fighters, or Patrice Lumumba, in the DRC, new colonization was actually playing itself in the DRC. So that's one example that we've been using. And I also have used an example of a conversation between Inkosi Amazulu, Inkosi Yesizwe Samazulu, Ushaga, King Shaga, when there was a conversation that was negotiating land with the settlers, white settlers in South Africa in the early days, in the 1900s. It's a short snippet that I showed you, where, for instance, in this conversation, you can see that Ushaka is having a conversation with two gentlemen, two settlers, white settlers, to say, you actually are asking as visitors in Africa to say you would like to live with us as African people, you would like to share land with us. And part of that negotiation, that video, I can't remember whether I've shared it on Moodle, but I will hope you can see it and post it again. It is also in the content that I've shared. So he then asks this question to say, how would you like to live with us in the context of land? And of course, they have this argument, and I mean, this it was not really an argument, but it's a conversation, and they say, no, Nkosi, we would like to sit in Africa in a way that we become neighbors. You know, perhaps at some point we will grow to become relatives of each other. Um, but our concern is that we would not like to be overcrowded in the manner that we live together. And of course, this concept of overcrowding is spoken about. And Shaga asks a very pertinent question, which is a question that also is at the center of what Nkrumah speaks about when he speaks about new colonization. He asks this question, Shaka Zulu, kulabo baba, uti, what is going to happen if in this negotiation and settlement around land, we agree to live together and you happen to love our land so much that you are no longer able to perhaps go back to your own land, which in this particular context of the conversation is Europe. What should we do? And of course there was no answer. And the other intriguing question in that conversation, and I'm raising these because these are realities of the things that we need to know when we study Africa. This is not just a story in a book, it's not fiction, it's something that happened in the history, yesizwe samaZulu, in the history of various kings and queens of Africa, of the African continent. So Ushaga then, and then they say, then he illustrates to say, okay, how are we going to live, I mean, in terms of space, in terms of land, in terms of occupation? Because there's vast land in the African continent. That's what the settlers saw and they were attracted to. Um, and Nkosi Ushaka is bothered by this question to say, even questions of identity. Because one of the persons in class, in the last class, was asking, is it possible that this whole concept of new colonization is also linked to issues of identity? And my answer was possibly it is, because Nkosi Ushaka Zulu in that conversation asked this question to say, what would happen then if abantwana bethu, nabantwana bami njengoShaka nezizukulwana, our generation or future descendants, of who we are in this negotiation of land, happen to no longer want to go away, who is going to be called African? Is it my own children and their own children who are going to be called African, or is it yours? And we touched on those things as well, because they come a lot also in the ideas of new colonization. And of course, then the story of the DRC, where the son of King Leopoldo II, you will remember the story of the DRC. What happened in the DRC is that King Leopoldo II was also one of the settlers that, of course, identified the Congo and loved the resources that he discovered in Congo and colonized Congo. It's a long story. And then at the time of independence, at the time that Nkrumah is writing, Umshana Wake comes to the Congo. It's all in the video, the niece. And he comes, this is his uncle. They're supposed to be handing over the independence to Congo and they don't. And of course, comes with his arrogance in the manner that he speaks to the people of Congo. And Patrice Lumumba as a liberating fighter, of course, gets pissed off. He gets irritated by this thing, and he jumps. And this is part of the reason why Patrice Lumumba is murdered and assassinated. So that is what we've spoken about for those of us who are joining us for the first time. And it's all again in the content. I'm just providing a summary. So Patrice Lumumba rises up and he gives a counter narrative to what is being said by this niece of King Leopold II. And on the very same day, they get angry at Patrice Lumumba and they organize the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And what they do is they put Patrice Lumumba together with his secretary at loggerheads at that time, because the secretary of any political leader would know everything about that political leader. And it was just a simple letter that was meant to arrive to a particular government. I think it was one of the governments, I think it must have been the Soviet Union, because Patrice Lumumba then realized that the um, Belgians, which was King Leopold II, were refusing to give up power. So he sought for external intervention. He went to the US, he went to the Soviet Union, and part of the correspondence, of course, had to be sent by the secretary. But then they do this political thing of putting them together at loggerheads and selling power to each other. And the secretary, of course, betrayed Patrice Lumumba. It's a long story short, but the Americans got to know about this particular thing, that Patrice Lumumba is also reaching to the Soviet Union on the same day. And we know the story. The Soviet Union and the US are not friends. They were never friends. It's a struggle of socialism and capitalism in the world generally. So that is where we've been talking about, and I'm bringing this particular context for people who have joined us for the first time in class, but also as a summary to understand why we are talking about new colonization, to understand Nkrumah and other scholars and other authors who are talking about the struggle of African independence, colonial Africa in particular as well, and what it means. And we are still sitting with the example of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So today we're continuing from there, and I'm hoping that you would have read far deeper the literature Yagan Nkrumah that I've sent, that reading. It's just an introduction to the book, most of it, and some short parts of the book. So I don't know if there are any questions on the summary before we go deeper into today's conversations. Or somebody says you can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Smilo says lonke. Yazwakala manje. Hello? Brian, can you hear me?
Yes.
Amanda, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear, miss.
Okay. The people who are saying that you can't hear me. Maybe the problem is on your side. Amanda says she can hear me. Okay, Smilo sekayangizwa manje. All right. Sorry about that. I think it's network problems. It comes and it goes. So that is what we are talking about. Then we are sitting with Nkrumah, understanding new forms of colonialism and how dangerous actually new colonialism is as a form of what you call colonialism in the times that we live in. Other people and other scholars would call it modern, a form. So I would like to open the floor. Today I want us to just talk. I would like us to just talk a little bit more based on the content that I've shared so far and in the conversation that we've had. What has been your understanding of Nkrumah's ideas of new colonization? What are the questions that you are sitting with? What are the concerns that you're sitting with? Is there anyone amongst us here who has not read Nkrumah's written so far? All right, so let's talk then. What is it that you actually understand? I mean, let's look at the story of the DRC. Peggy Temba, I see your hand is up. What is coming up? What are the issues there? Are you getting this story? Are there any things that you'd like to engage with more? So the floor is open. Peggy Temba.
Thank you, Doctor. Oh, I mean, I had a preconceived question before I engage with the current topic that we are raising as to how can we go around by decolonizing Africa. I get that one of decolonizing the mind, but of decolonizing the education of Africa, because now as an African, as a colonized African student, as Kwame Nkrumah puts it, you are being taught Greek and the European history. Maybe in your first year, then your second year, they just titillate you some sort of African intellectuals. Then on third year, you go back to study those European and Greek history. How can we go about what is holding us back for us to implement like the African, like to Africanize our education, or is there any criteria that is required in a global space that every education must go through this lens, or each continent or each country can create their educational lens? How can we go about to create this kind of education that will liberate our African children, their minds? Because sometimes I get so perplexed when you engage with some of our black students, some of our black peers. When you talk about no, Africa needs to be free completely, they say, what are you talking about? Because we are already free. We have everything. Now we can go to town. Like, you see that we have a huge problem with some of our peers who can't even understand the conscience of this of the politics of Africa. So how can we go about to Africanize our education so that the students will come up, maybe even if we can start from grade 1 going up, students to be aware of our African roots, and as us as African, that we are rich and we are capable of being one of the best continents in the region. Just earlier this morning, I was just reading some headlines whereby the African leaders, two African leaders, were calling for a permanent seat in the UN UN Security Council, and one of them was President Cyril Ramaphosa. I was so amazed that Cyril Ramaphosa can think. How can we go about that? Because right now you don't even have a say in the African in the council that takes higher decisions. So how can you go about to do those things at an early stage to up? Because some of the people only tell them that white people must go. They will tell you that the economy will shut down. We don't even have the economy ourselves. They are saying we're approaching for the industrial revolution, but we haven't mastered the first revolution, the industrial revolution. How can you be so eager to go on to fourth and fifth industrial revolution when you haven't mastered even first one going forward? Thank you.
Very critical question, Peggy Temba. I don't know if there's anyone that would like to either engage with that or also share maybe also what your reflection has been when you were reading Roma, or questions that you have as well. Any other thoughts? but there are so many. I mean, Nkrumah touches on the question of education, and it's a very key question. Um, one of the things that he says in this reading is that what a new colonization has done, there are various methods that they use in the system itself, right? When I say they, one of those methods is to choose where to invest the most. And he talks about a concept of invisible governance, that what happened after the Second World War, immediately there's a group of people that have come together. And the intention of this group of people was to form an alternative system of governance whose intention is to make sure that the system and the benefits of colonization do not go away, even as colonies were being freed and being given political independence. And he talks about the fact that this invisible government is a form of government that includes members of parliament, members who are serving in various government systems, um, members of the business fraternity, members of the labor movements, um, amongst others. So he mentions the system of invisible governance, and they have studied former colonies' systems and ways of being so well that the intention of making sure that even as we are artificially being politically independent, that economically, culturally, and otherwise will remain subjugated. Education was one of the ways and the areas where that invisible form of governance, according to Nkrumah, you will see this when you read the article, that invisible form of governance is skeptical of investing in areas of education, mainly because once a mind is conscientized, once bodies of people are aware of what is happening, of course, through a system of learning, through a system of education. Nkrumah argues that then they are likely, in the education sector, for example, the invisible governance globally is skeptical of investing in this sector, mainly because by nature, once people become aware, they become conscientized and they organize. And one of the fears is that when students in former colonies become aware of what is happening, then you find the rising of various student movements. And it is happening in various parts of the world. You can see in India, you can see in South Africa, you can see it in various parts of former colonies. Once the student body becomes conscientized and becomes aware, you find a lot of rising of the student movement that is saying we want decolonized education, we want decolonized ways of being, because you are becoming aware of the narrative, you are becoming aware of the content, which is why then this invisible structure of governance, alternative structure of governance, Nkrumah argues that all of our so-called parliamentary democratic governments are not actually run by the presidents that you see in power. They are run by this invisible source, which is organized deliberately to make sure that colonization or new colonization does not disappear. And it uses institutions like the International Monetary Fund, your World Bank, your World Trade Organization, and so on. And internationally, in the context of education and culture and heritage, structures like UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Science, and Organization, is one of the instruments that is a catalyst to this. So to answer your question then, to say why is it that our education systems are not being transformed? Why is it that former colonies are not producing narratives and content that is decolonized, that is starting from the very first entry point when you enter university, when you enter an institution of intent, we have to constantly go back to content of the colonizers. It's a question that we are all confronted with as the generation of today, as the intellectuals of today. And I mean, it's you can read a content, just read international literature, you will see there's 5 men, white men in particular, globally, that have informed the system of education, of what we call education today. And post-colonial thinkers of various former colonies, not just in Africa, in Latin America in particular also, who are organized intellectually and politically around the practice of what you call post-coloniality. Abondlovu Gajeni, for example, in terms of some of the scholars of the current times, are troubled by this phenomenon. Maldonado Torres in Latin America is one of the troubled scholars about this. Oyewumi, I can mention a number of them. So, and that is exactly the question that we should engage ourselves in, to say, what is it that we lose if we make a decisive call intellectually to say, can we begin the narratives from the place of who we are? And I don't have the answers, but that is, I'm just presenting the version that Nkrumah presents in that article that I've given you. Part of being a scholar is to then find your own perspective and your own argument around these issues. What is it that you think should be done? Because you see, the role of being an intellectual in the time that we live in, there's a saying that says each and every generation um,
Must find its mission.
has got a duty to liberate during its own time. So it's part of that to say the answers of yesterday may not necessarily be the answers of today. And the questions that Upegitemba are posing to all of us as intellectuals of today, intellectuals of tomorrow, are the questions that need to push us into a place of birthing ideas that will offer solutions to systems of governance of today. And some of those may not necessarily be in the books of yesterday, but they live in our minds and in our bodies, and so on, and our experiences as well. So I think that is what Nkrumah poses as the dangers of new colonization, because new colonization would not let scholars of today be able to do that. And one of the means in which Nkrumah argues it's done is that they stop investing in education, they stop investing in health systems, but would rather invest in things like the military, for argument's sake. Um, and the idea of this invisible government, in terms of this article that I've shared with you, Yagon Nkrumah, is to make sure that political power is seen as happening, which is what you see today. Most of independent countries are able to have elections today, democratic constitutions, systems of governance, of voting, where you can vote a government into power. Some of them do it every 5 years, and then you can select another president. You can have multi-party democracies and so on. So in the visible eye, it appears as if that is an expression of freedom, that is an expression of African independence. Whereas at an economic level, actually the presidents that we put in power remain subservient to an economic system that holds them hostage, in a sense that a president is not going to be able to end poverty, give access to education to his or her citizens, because for that president to be able to do that, he has to constantly go back to the IMF, has to constantly go back to the World Bank which is governed by this invisible government body internationally. And therefore, and also constantly sign agreements that are saying you're going to be a perpetual producer of raw materials at these rates that are set by the World Trade Organization. We are going to export your raw materials, and we are not going to be able to negotiate prices above the ones that we give you. And it has been calculated so well that, when those prices are settled at that amount, you are not going to be able to rise into competitive advantage, and therefore you can't. It's impossible that you can argue yourself out of dependence in that sense. And that is framed as aid. It's framed as development aid. It is framed as financial aid. It is framed as humanitarian aid. It is different forms of aid that you see happening all over the globe. And it is done usually, if you see in the example of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Belgium wanted to continue maintaining its hand in the DRC's way of governance, in the DRC's economic policies, but also was negotiating the fact that even as Congo was becoming independent, can they please be able to negotiate trade in the mining sector, in the agricultural sector, and so on. And that's exactly what is happening everywhere. In South Africa, we have got the same situation when it comes to gold and diamonds. Botswana is in the same position when it comes to the diamonds in Botswana. Nigeria is in the same position when it comes to the situation of oil. Um, Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, many of the African countries, Brazil is struggling. We can see Bonga, the person in your room. Brazil is struggling with the Amazon, the forests. There are many examples that we can make, but that is what exactly Nkrumah is talking about in terms of new colonization, that it has been set, there's a standard that has been set, there's a bar that has been set to say, once the bar is kept at this point, it is impossible for the former colony to be a master or to be above the master. The master will constantly be the provider of the resources that are needed for the colony to be. Um, but we will leave the territories and we will give political power away, but not economic power. So Nkrumah talks about those things in this article called Colonialism as the last stage of imperialism and perhaps the most dangerous stage of imperialism. And anyone who studies African politics, and this module is about contemporary African politics and development in Africa, because there is a language of development at the same time there's a language of politics. What actually is this development is what Nkrumah is at the center of in this article. So I don't know, Peggy, if I've engaged with your question, but I mean, the floor is open. Anyone else can come in, please feel free, or perhaps also ask another question that you may have in relation to the subject of new colonization.
Well, you have touched all of the aspects
Does
of
that make
what
sense?
I have raised. All of it you have.
Peggy, I think you are talking, but
Yeah,
we can't
it
hear
really,
you.
really
A
makes
bit
sense.
far.
Oh, am I audible now?
Can anyone hear
Can you
what
hear
Peggy
me?
is saying?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Bonga, uyamuzwa
Yes,
uPeggy?
ngiyamuzwa ubheki.
Oh, yindaba mina ngingamuzwa.
Kushuthi inkinga ye-network kuwena.
Hello?
Usiyangizwa manje?
Ngiyakuzwa.
Mina
Ah,
ngiyakuzwa.
ngiyakuzwa. No, it was my fault. I had a speaker cord on. Sorry. I can hear you now.
Okay. Okay, okay. But what I wanted to say is that when we approached colonialism, was it genuine for those former colonizers to leave us with their political independence, or it was the amount of pressure that they were receiving globally that, you know what, or it was the amount of pressure from us and the mass demonstrations and all of those vandalism that we applied on the ground for them to let us have the political independence, and then they will decide on to hold us with this neo-colonialism. I mean, if it was from our victory that we approached colonialism with stones and former our former soldiers who went to the exile and bushes, and then with even our people, our grandmothers who used to cook for those for our forefathers who were fighting there. What is then stopping us to expose neocolonialism and so that it can raise its ugly head? Because Nkwame Nkrumah is of the view that once we take neocolonialism, it will show its ugly head, which is war, and then we will face it on with the war. And he even says that many people are avoiding that because they are speculating that it will spark a world war. I think a World War III. So is it taking into consideration that those countries of Asia, Latin America have managed to tackle neo-colonialism with anything? So is it that us as Africa we are the only grip for the colonizers? That Africa is our only grip. If Africa decides to shift away from them, then they will be left in an island, then they will revolt in a war. Is that what is shift from the grip of being neo-colonized, and then will stand on its own, and then those countries will be left in an island to the point of by what, let's, because he even says that when they see that people are starting to be conscious, they will revoke their funding to other departments and direct them to the military groups. So is that possible?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. Very, very good question. It's a question that is being asked all the time, and it's a very hard choice because it's a choice of saying, is there any other possible way in which colonization can end without bloodshed, without without necessarily ending up in a state of civil war. And we will talk about conflict and wars in Africa at some point in this module, which is exactly the reason why some of the countries are in a state of war today when not big. Because some of them have taken that route to say we have to expose this new colonization and resist it. Former President Mugabe, the late, is one of those examples in Southern Africa, for instance, on the question of land, and how Zimbabwe decided to respond to the question of taking back the land that was stolen by the Scandal for Africa. So it's hard questions. I think when you are a president or you are a leader, um, you are confronted with these questions. Do I lead the country to war, or do I lead a country to a peaceful resistance of some sort? Um,
I
Even
think
as
war
we
is the
find ways
answer
of
from this
exposing.
one. I
Yeah,
think war is the answer. If we can liberate our people their mind, we liberate our people their mind, we give them guns. Not necessarily giving them guns, but we make sure that we blockade all of these neo-colonialism tactics and their guises that they come with. And then when they show their ugly head, we attack. Because once we show that we don't want them, it's either they will say there are human rights violations. They will fund those tracks, like what they did in Libya there. And then as Africa, that's what Nkrumah is saying, that if we had only our own military that is united, we could have salvaged the situation in Congo. But rather than that, they included NATO, but NATO even that failed because they were pushing their own agendas. So if only us as Africans, we can even say, we say no, if we are going to trade with us, these are our terms and conditions, because it doesn't make sense whereby when we are going to seek for a debt in those institutions, they will ask for information in regards to your country on how are you making revenue and which department or which company makes revenue, and how are you investing in those departments yearly or budget. When you fail to cover those debts, they will sanction, not necessarily sanctioning, but they will cut funding, some structural advancement policies in those departments. And necessarily that when you respond, they will sanction those departments that you provided information to them that these are the cash cows of your country. So they sanction those, so that that's what they did in Zimbabwe as well. So if you can be able to say no, we are it's enough, like what Sankara was saying, like let us produce in Africa, let us manufacture in Africa, and let us all eat and buy in Africa. So if we can do that, they will then fund those rebels, like that, like rebels that we have. Then when they funded those rebels, us as Africa will unite and respond. Like what Nkrumah is saying, that they are funding those small wars, because even those small wars, what they can achieve is small. So if we can also unite as Africa and face those smaller wars with guns, and make sure that we shove them away, we remain as we are, because that's what even the theory of realism is saying, that everything in the international space is power politics. There will never
Please,
be in a space whereby
Becky,
we'll
please
be
can you
in a
come
romantic
closer to
state.
the mic? Uyazwakala, but a little bit
I
far.
am close to the mic. I'm close.
All right.
Oh, ngizwakala kahle manje.
Much better. Thank you so much.
Okay, did you hear me?
I did hear you, yes. It's just you're a bit softer, but it's much louder now. It's okay.
So like what I
we had
was
everything
saying, would
since then.
even okay. Thank you. So I was just entailing that there would never be a point where I was saying, can a president say, can I lead a country? But because if I'm not going to war, then we'll continue being exploited. There is no other way of that. I think president as the chair of the AU can make sure that she do something, because I was speaking with this other lecturer the other day. He was saying that the other AU, which was the former AU, it doesn't make sense. But this one of Gaddafi, the former president, and that one is really good. So I think if you can face this thing with wars, we can achieve something.
Okay. I just want to show you a clip quickly, and then we can go into group discussions just on this question, because it's very key, that we sort of find our own voices on this one. So this is Ya Asantewa, a warrior queen of Ghana, was confronted with the same issues. The situation here was exactly the same battles around resources. It's just 3 minutes, it's not long. And the colonizers in Ghana at that time wanted to take the golden stool, which is a very important symbol for the people of Ghana, the empire actually, of Ejisu at that time, which is what we call modern Ghana now. And we're talking both pre-colonial Africa and Africa. So one of the things, of course, that have happened is that the scramble of Africa has done away with the empires and the kingdom and the queendoms of the African continent, which is a subject that we may touch on also as we go along, just to give you a sense of pre-colonial Africa. But this one is at the center of this debate that we are having now. So I'm going to play it and then we'll come back.
Often compared to Joan of Arc.
Oh, sorry, let me just put the speaker. I don't think you can hear sound. Okay, please give me 2 minutes. I'm just looking for a speaker for the lecture sound. All right, we are back. There's someone who's talking about the bathroom and the kitchen. I can't see who that person is, but we can hear you. Please mute your mic. All right, so I'm going to play this video, Yaga Asantewa. Asantewa is a very important person in our history of the country.
Compared to Joan of Arc and to Bobadil's leadership of the war against the Romans, Yaa Asantewaa's decision to lead the war against the British is one of the most fascinating and dramatic responses to a crisis in the 19th century Asante by a man or a woman. On March 28, 1900, Governor Hodgson entered Kumasi and demanded that the golden stool, the symbol of Asante unity and pride, be given to him as representative of Queen Victoria. In the absence of the Asante Hini, already exiled in the Seychelles along with other leading chiefs, Yaa Asantewaa, Queen Mother of Ejisu, became, as the saying goes, the only man among the men. She questioned, how can a proud and brave people like the Asante sit back and look while the white man takes away their king and chief and humiliates them with the demand for the golden stool? The golden stool only means money to the white man. They have searched and dug everywhere for it. I shall not pay one prejuan to the governor. If you, the chiefs of Ashanti, are going to behave like cowards and not fight, you should exchange your loincloth for my undergarments. And
the leaders felt, the chiefs felt so ashamed and so provoked that they swore there and then that they were going to fight, especially if the British didn't make any effort to seize the golden stool. And after that meeting, and it was at that meeting that Yaa Asantewaa was appointed the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. I don't think there are many people who are aware of the fact that the Asante and the British fought in 1824, in 1826, in 1874, in 1896, and finally in 1900. I don't think many people do know of any of this, do know much about the first four wars. But almost every schoolboy now knows about the Asantewaa War. An old woman called Yaa Asantewaa lives in Ejisu, the mother or aunt of the chief there, a man who was sent into exile with Prempeh, the first Nana Since then, she has ruled the town. She has much influence in the whole Asante and is the soul and head of the whole rebellion. She is in fact sitting quietly in Nagisu, but sends orders out from there to the different camps around Kumasi. Her main representative in the army is the Sigward chief of the Seniors.
Okay, so that is just a brief I wanted to share with you. Just as one of the things that happen, Peggy, when leaders rise in that way that you are proposing, that why is it that we don't rise into war? Yeah, Asantewa was the queen of the Ashanti Empire. She is the aunt to one of the chiefs at that time, and the chief was sent to exile by the British colonialists, of course, for many things that the people of Ghana have been fighting for. Like we said, liberation did not come as a platter on the table. Even as it was negotiated, our leaders had to fight for it, and people have died. Ya Asantewa was also one of the people that was eventually exiled in Seychelles for being a queen warrior who stood, in battle, as it is illustrated briefly in that video. There's a lot written about it. Please read it when you have time on your own. It's a beautiful story to understand about the queen regents in particular, because Africa has got what you call the queen regents, which have the same power as kings when it comes to the ways of being African queendoms and kingdoms. So Ya Santewa was one of the queen regents of the people of Ghana. She was mother to the chief, but also an aunt. I mean, she raised him literally. But the moral of the story in response to what Upegi is asking, and these are the questions that asking. I was listening yesterday, in fact, or to a video Yaga Julius Malema, the president of the EFF, and the situation that is currently happening in the Free State, I think, about in Senegal. I don't know if people are following that. If you don't, I will share with you so that you can read it. The argument there
Yeah.
is also about land. Yeah, Upegi, I think Upegi has seen it. So there are similarities in these kinds of stories because the media is asking Julius Malema the very same question that you're asking us, Peggy, here to say, why is it that we are seen to be, as African people, we are so lenient when it comes to the sustenance and the maintenance of coloniality in our spaces. In the context of South Africa, whether it is the fact that white people continue to own the land at the expense of everybody else, in the case of Ghana, whether it is about what Asantewa is saying, why do you want to give away the golden stool, which is a symbol of unity in our nation? It's a sacred symbol of our foremothers and our forefathers. And for a white man, it only symbolizes money and nothing else. Um, the story of Zimbabwe is the same, on the question of land. The story of Botswana is the same on the question of diamonds. The story of Zambia on the question of copper is the same. There's many other stories that we can say. So the question remains: why is it that Africa is so lenient? And Julius Malema was asked this question just yesterday and last week in South Africa, to say, if we have to go to war, he argues, so be it. And others, of course, are saying, no, let us not take that route. Um, when you're dealing about resources and land, it's about food security, it's about also state security, it's about questions of national security. Where, Peggy, you are talking about the army and what happened, for instance, in Libya, in other countries. So I don't have the answers, but I would like us to spend the next 10 minutes, perhaps in groups, to deliberate on these questions. The answers that come from your heart and head and so on, we will then come back and have a discussion as a collective here. And then I will then once we've discussed, I'll bring back some of the elements of what Nkrumah is raising in that reading as we wrap it up. Because tomorrow, on Friday, we will start a new subject of decolonizing our minds from understanding the context of decolonization. But I'll keep bringing back the different aspects of pre-colonial Africa as we go along. So I'm going to break us randomly into groups now. It is 10:43. We will stay in the groups until 11 o'clock. Just discuss this question that Biggie is asking us and some of the concerns that you may have in relation to this question of new colonization. Is it possible for Africa to free itself from new colonization? And what are the possibilities? Or should we stay in it? What are the possibilities? What are the benefits? There are people who are arguing that we are okay now, we've lived with this forever, and we continue to benefit from it. We get money from our former colonizers, and we are where we are. Let us keep the status quo and learn to live together. Other people are saying, let us rise, like Peggy is saying. So I'm going to break you into groups randomly. Please accept the group that you see in your screen. How many are we here? Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, okay. Someone says 11 o'clock in the class. Is that a clash or is it me that is misunderstanding the length of this class? Peggy?
I don't know, but in the class 11 up to 12. The last time ngathi ngifika ngafika so late. And maybe it's a clash, I don't know.
Is that the same with everyone else here? Just want to check. What time is this class supposed to end? I thought in terms of your timetable, I could be using, I'm just checking at the interest of doing the right thing, Peggy, not necessarily against what you are saying. Because if you're supposed to be ending at 11, I don't want to keep everybody here beyond that time. Does anyone have a timetable? Do you know what time is this class supposed to be ending? Onkazimolo also says, yes, I have a class for 11. All right. Okay, let us then have a 5-minute group discussion and come back at 10 to, and then we will wrap up at 11 because it seems that is the situation for everyone. Okay, I see. All right, I'm breaking you into groups. In 5 minutes, we'll be back at 10 to, and we have a conversation and we wrap up. Please join your groups up here, Ryan, Lucas, Lunga, Sigelelo, and Spelel.
purpose manner.
Okay. At the interest of time, I don't want to hold you for the next class. I'm just going to ask one or two people to reflect on what you, maybe one or two, and then we wrap up. We'll continue on Friday. Anyone that would like to share from the group discussions? Should I pick you randomly? I will not volunteer. There's no volunteer. Should I pick on anyone? I prefer that people just speak from volunteering. Otherwise, let us sit with the question. And I think when we speak on Friday, please prepare yourself on the question. When we speak on Friday, I would really like everybody to participate. Let us not overwork Ubegi. Let us and let us all contribute. Begi, over to you.
Oh, was I raising my hand? I was listening to you completely.
All right, no.
I was just saying from our group, from what we have discovered, that no, it is not possible to just because they will never allow us to just go like that because we are they are cash cow. So they will never, they will, if we are going to move away, like what Franz Fanon was saying, that Africa is crowded with colonial hands. So from us to shift away, we have to hit those hands away so that we may be freed. So from our group, that's what they were saying. If we are to say we are going to have one economy, one currency, one passport and stuff like that, then we must be prepared to fight because at some point we will fight. And then we must be ready for that. And then we must make sure that everyone is of the view that we are fighting from the same for the same good. Because if with this democracy, while we are saying we are fighting neocolonialism, it's not going to take us anywhere. Because some people say, I know We are free. We are going to fight our own battle. I think we are safe. Those people are staying there in their apartments, driving nice cars. They won't see any need for us to fight. So if we are going to restrict like what China is doing, and monitoring their citizens with a close eye, and then making sure that all spies and espionages are making sure that they will catch them, and they are guarding every social media space and every update that they develop. They are making sure that they are guarding those stuff. They are guarding their revolution. That's what we need as Africa.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you so much. Feel free to leave for your next class. It is 1 minute to 11. We'll see each other on Friday. Bonga, I see you wanted to say something.
Yes. I wanna share our argument from my group. From my group, we had an idea that from or reflecting from the question was that it's not easy now to escape from neo-colonialism or neo-colonization. It was right at the beginning when African countries gained their independence. So I feel like African countries as a whole, most of African countries betrayed Zimbabwe because I think we should reflect as how Zimbabwe reflects when they got their independence. So I feel like the situation or the way Zimbabwe is right now, it's the fault of African countries. So I think working toward the solution of escaping from neocolonialism, in our group, we didn't have like a real solution. So we said any solution can come up with anyone in Africa. So we can try that strategy to escape from neocolonialism, but it won't be easy as it was going to be right at the beginning when countries of Africa gained their independence. That's all we discussed.
Thank you very much, Bonga. Siyabonga kakhulu from your group. I don't see any other hands, and it is 1 minute past 11. So we will leave it at that for today. We will continue the conversations, think more about the questions, and we'll engage more because these are the questions of today. I will share with you an example from the economies of West Africa. They are at the center of that debate as we speak. ECOWAS it is called. ECOWAS is working to negotiate a single currency for the economies of West Africa. And of course, there is resistance from the former colonizers who are mostly French countries. Okay, so we'll continue. I'll share some examples from ECOWAS just to feed on this conversation about what is currently happening on the continent in relation to these conversations. See you next time. It is always a pleasure to be here. Please do not panic about tutorials. We are in conversation with Dr. Hosea and the head tutors to make sure that we start our tutorials for post 206 next week. That information will be circulated to everyone as soon as it has been finalized. I am aware that some of you are already allocated into your tutorials and some of you are not. That process is being finalized. Check your emails. All the allocations have been sent by email. And I've requested them to also join the WhatsApp group so that communication can be faster on the various mediums. And they are also part of our Moodle page. They will be sharing information as well via Moodle. Have a lovely day. I don't know if there are any questions in relation to just the administrative parts of the module.
Yes, Doc. Can you please share or maybe text the message or just tell the title of the video that you shared? Like because the sound is not really good, then maybe I can watch it on my own time.
Okay, no problem. Bonga, I always share them on Moodle. Do you have access to Moodle?
Yes, like when you share them, right? Like you share the video or the whole video of the class or the single video that you share on the class.
No, I share the whole video of the class. So you are asking me to share even the single videos themselves separately.
If
Is
you
that what
can,
you're
but
asking?
I was just asking for the title of the video so that I can search it on YouTube on my time, then watch it, because the sound is just really good when you are sharing it right here at the class on
I
Zoom
see.
meeting.
I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Okay, what I will do, Bonga, I will
Yes.
share the videos as well separately on Moodle. Will that help?
Oh yes. Thanks.
Okay, good. No, I understand what you mean. My video, I was mangabe uwamamela from the class video itself. Okay, no problem. I will send them separately as well, on our WhatsApp
Thank you.
space, but also on Moodle. Thank you for making me aware. Are there any other concerns, questions, comments before we close?
Doctor.
Yes, Andile.
Yes. I wanted to find out for some of us that our registration has not been captured. Is it possible to add, like temporarily add the module on Moodle so we can access the work and everything? Since they said it's gonna be sorted out by Friday, I think.
It is possible, Andile. Um, just let me know what's happened, and then I will make it happen.
My details via WhatsApp.
Yes, yeah. I just need your student number, your name and your surname, because sometimes you have people have the same names and surnames. So it's important to send your name and your surname and your student number.
Okay, no problem, Doctor. I'll do
Okay.
that.
All right. You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely day. See you on Friday.
Thank you. Yo. On the meeting.